My parents always said I was an accident. Now my sister demands my house because unplanned children don't deserve what planned ones worked for. Update: she was just arrested for forgery. Hi everyone. Today's story will blow your mind, but really quick, if you enjoy this content, hit that subscribe button. Channel's been a bit quiet lately, and your support keeps it all going. Let's jump in. Original post. I never thought I'd be writing this, but I need to get this off my chest and maybe get some perspective from strangers on the internet. I'm James, 24M, and this is about my older sister Sarah, 28F, and the duplex that's become the latest battleground in our lifelong war. Though war implies both sides are fighting, and I've mostly just been trying to survive. Let me start with context that still stings to type out. I'm an accident. Not in the metaphorical sense. My parents, Robert, 52M, and Linda, 50F, have told me this directly since I was old enough to understand words. We thought we were done after Sarah, my mother would say at family gatherings, wine glass in hand, laughing like it was a funny anecdote. James was our little surprise. The word surprise was always delivered with a tone that made it clear it wasn't the good kind. Sarah learned this truth early and weaponized it with surgical precision. When I was 7 and she was 11, she told me I was the reason Mom had to quit her promotion track at the bank. When I was 10, she explained that the family vacation to Disney World we couldn't afford anymore was because unplanned babies are expensive. By the time I was in high school, she had refined her message to its core. You know you don't really belong here, right? We were a complete family before you showed up. My parents never stopped her. If anything, they inadvertently encouraged it through their silence and their own comments. Dad would joke about having to work 5 more years because of me. Mom would sigh when looking at college brochures with Sarah, saying, at least we only had to plan for one college fund originally. They weren't cruel people, just carelessly honest in a way that carved pieces out of me I'm still trying to rebuild. I moved out at 18, the day after high school graduation. I worked 3 jobs while going to community college, lived in a studio apartment with black mold in the bathroom, and saved every penny I could. My parents were surprised, there's that word again, when I transferred to a 4-year university on academic scholarships. Sarah was furious. She'd gone to an expensive private school on their dime and graduated with a communications degree she never used. Here's where things get relevant to my current situation. Through careful saving, investing a small inheritance from my grandmother, who, ironically, always said I was her favorite surprise, and working remotely as a software developer, I managed to buy a duplex 6 months ago. It's nothing fancy, a 1960s building that needed work, but it's in an up-and-coming neighborhood. I live in one unit and rent out the other, which covers most of my mortgage. It's the first thing I've ever owned, the first space that's truly mine. Last month, Sarah found out about the duplex. I hadn't told my family because I knew it would cause problems, but she saw my post on LinkedIn about becoming a homeowner. The next day, she called me with a proposition that still makes my jaw clench. James, we need to talk about your duplex situation. I think there's been a misunderstanding about family assets and priorities. I asked what she meant, genuinely confused. Look, you know how this works in our family. I'm the planned child, the one they prepared for. You were. Well, you know what you were. It's not fair that you should have property when I'm still renting. You can stay there as my tenant, but the deed needs to be transferred to the rightful family member. I laughed, thinking it was a twisted joke. It wasn't. I'm serious, she continued. Unplanned children don't deserve what planned ones worked for. Mom and Dad invested everything in me because I was supposed to be their legacy. You having property before me is basically stealing from what should have been my inheritance. I hung up on her. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, she's escalated. She's been telling extended family that I manipulated our grandmother into leaving me money. She's posted on Facebook about siblings who don't understand family hierarchy and the pain of watching someone take what was meant for you. But yesterday, she crossed a line that has me genuinely concerned. My tenant, Jennifer, called me confused. Sarah had shown up claiming to be my family representative and walked through her unit with 2 people she introduced as potential buyers. She told Jennifer that I was having financial and mental health troubles, and the family was stepping in to help me liquidate assets. Jennifer, thankfully, is a paralegal and immediately sensed something was off. She didn't let them into her unit beyond the front entrance and called me right away. When I confronted Sarah via text, I now document everything, she responded, I'm trying to help you, James. You clearly can't handle this responsibility. Remember, you were never supposed to be here anyway. This is me being kind, letting you stay as a tenant instead of just pushing you out completely. The worst part. When I called my parents, my father said, we can't get involved in sibling disputes, while my mother added, maybe you should consider Sarah's feelings, honey. She's always had certain expectations about being the first to achieve these milestones. I'm at a loss. I worked for everything I have. I never asked them for a dime after I left home. I've tried to build something despite spending my childhood being reminded I was an unwanted surprise. And now my sister wants to take the one thing that makes me feel like I might actually deserve to exist. I've already called a lawyer and installed security cameras. But I need to know, am I crazy for thinking this is insane? Has anyone dealt with a sibling who genuinely believes they're entitled to your achievements because of birth order or planned status? How do I protect myself from someone who's spent their entire life believing I shouldn't have anything? I'm exhausted from a lifetime of fighting for space to exist in my own family. I just wanted a home. Was that too much for an accident to want? Update 1, 2 weeks later. I want to thank everyone who responded to my original post. Your comments about documenting everything and getting legal protection were spot on. I've hired a real estate attorney, and good thing too, because Sarah has lost her mind. Since my last post, here's what has happened. The day after I posted, Sarah showed up at my duplex with our parents and a real estate agent named Patricia. She told Patricia that she had power of attorney over my assets due to my diminished capacity. Patricia, to her credit, asked to see documentation. Sarah produced a printed email that was supposedly from me, stating I wanted her to handle the sale. The email address was james_lastname_2024@gmail.com. My actual email has been the same since high school and is nothing like that. My father stood there, silent. My mother actually said, "James, maybe you should hear them out." I asked them all to leave. Sarah refused, saying it was her property and she had every right to be there. I called the police. The officers who responded were professional but clearly thought this was ridiculous family drama. Sarah played the concerned sister beautifully, telling them about my recent mental health struggles and how the family was worried about my isolation. She even shed tears. My mother backed her up, saying I'd been acting strange lately and making impulsive financial decisions. Thankfully, I had all my documents ready: deed, mortgage papers, bank statements, and Jennifer's written statement about the previous incident. The officers told everyone except me to leave the property. Sarah screamed that I was stealing her life as they escorted her to her car. That evening, I got a call from my Uncle Thomas, my dad's brother. Sarah had called him crying, saying I'd become violent and unstable and stolen money from the family to buy property. She claimed our grandmother had dementia when she changed her will to include me. Completely false. Grandma was sharp until the day she died at 92. Thomas, who's always been kind to me, was concerned and wanted to hear my side. I sent him everything: screenshots of Sarah's texts, the fake email she'd created, Jennifer's statement, and the police report. His response was simple: "Jesus Christ, James. Your sister needs help." But here's where things get darker. Thomas called me back the next day after speaking with my parents. According to him, they're not as neutral as they claim. My mother told Thomas that while she doesn't approve of Sarah's methods, she understands her frustration. James was never supposed to have anything before Sarah, she actually said. We raised Sarah with certain expectations about being the first and only. It's cruel of James to disrupt that. My father apparently added that he's always felt guilty about my birth ruining their retirement plans, and suggested that if I gave Sarah the duplex, it would even things out for the disruption I caused by existing. Thomas was disgusted and told me he's cutting contact with them until they get their heads out of their asses. He also mentioned something that explained a lot. Apparently, my parents have been financially supporting Sarah for years. She doesn't actually have a job, that communications degree. She's never used it. She's been living off monthly payments from my parents while pretending to be an influencer with 327 Instagram followers. The rental she claimed she was living in? It's subsidized by my parents. This information changes everything. Sarah doesn't want my duplex because she deserves it as the planned child. She wants it because my parents are starting to hint about cutting her off now that my father is approaching retirement. She needs income property because she's never learned to support herself. I've implemented more security measures on my lawyer's advice. I changed all locks and installed a smart lock system that logs entry attempts. I put a freeze on my credit. I notified my mortgage company and provided them with documentation about potential fraud attempts. I installed cameras covering every angle of the property. I got title insurance and registered for title fraud alerts. I sent a cease and desist letter to Sarah through my lawyer. The letter triggered an epic meltdown. Sarah posted a long Facebook rant about ungrateful siblings who forget where they come from and the pain of watching someone you protected growing up turn against you. Protected? She once locked me in the basement during a thunderstorm and told me the house would collapse on the extra child first. Several relatives have reached out. The family is dividing into camps. A team Sarah, my parents, their friends, and a few cousins who've heard her version first. A team James, Uncle Thomas, my father's sister Patricia, who's always called my parents out on their treatment of me, and surprisingly, my grandmother's sister Aunt Margaret, who called to say, "Your grandmother never liked Sarah. Said she was a spoiled brat who needed a reality check." But yesterday brought a new development. My tenant Jennifer informed me that someone tried to access her unit with a key while she was at work, caught on her Ring doorbell. The person was wearing a hoodie, but the build looked like Sarah. The key didn't work, thank God I changed the locks, but the attempt is on video. Then, this morning, I got a call from a title company. Someone had submitted paperwork to list my property for sale. The documents included a forged power of attorney and a deed transfer supposedly signed by me. The signature was laughably bad. Sarah apparently traced my signature from an old birthday card. The title company flagged it as suspicious because my lawyer had already contacted them with a heads up. This is now identity theft and attempted fraud. My lawyer says we have enough for a restraining order and potentially criminal charges. But here's what's breaking my heart. My parents know. When I told my mother about the forged documents, she said, "Well, honey, maybe if you just shared with your sister, she wouldn't have had to go to these lengths." Had to. As if attempting to steal my house is a reasonable response to me existing and achieving something on my own. I'm proceeding with the restraining order. My lawyer is also sending a formal notice to my parents that any further participation in Sarah's schemes could make them legally liable as accomplices. I'm done trying to preserve relationships with people who've spent 24 years wishing I hadn't been born. Sarah sent one last text before I blocked her everywhere. "You can't escape what you are, James. An accident. A disruption. Everything you have is stolen from what I should have had." I responded with just the case number for the restraining order. I'm tired. Reddit. I'm so fucking tired of fighting for the right to exist and have things and be happy. But I'm not giving up my home. I worked for this. I deserve this. And for the first time in my life, I'm going to act like it. Update 2, 3 months later. This will be my final update, and I'm happy to say it's mostly good news, though the journey here has been rough. First, the legal situation. Sarah was arrested 6 weeks ago for identity theft, attempted fraud, and burglary. She was caught on camera trying to break into the duplex again, this time with a crowbar. The restraining order was granted immediately after her arrest. She's currently out on bail with conditions that include no contact with me, staying 500 feet away from my property, and wearing an ankle monitor. The arrest happened because she got sloppy and desperate. After the failed attempts with the forged documents, she created a fake listing for my duplex on 3 different real estate websites, using photos she'd taken during her showing and setting the price at about 60% of market value for a quick sale. She listed herself as the owner and used a Google Voice number. Several real estate agents contacted me directly, confused about the low price and multiple listings. One agent, Michael, was particularly helpful. He'd dealt with title fraud before and walked me through documenting everything. When someone actually showed up for a viewing that Sarah had scheduled, I was ready with police on speed dial. Sarah showed up in a blazer, pretending to be a real estate professional. She had fake business cards and a folder of fraudulent documents. The potential buyers, a young couple named David and Ashley, were obviously confused when I introduced myself as the actual owner. Sarah tried to claim I was a troubled tenant who was confused about the situation. That's when the police arrived. The arrest was dramatic. Sarah screamed that I was destroying the family and that our parents would never forgive me. She was right about one thing. My parents' reaction was unforgivable, just not in the way she meant. They bailed her out the next day and hired her a lawyer. My mother called me crying, not about what Sarah had done, but about how I'd humiliated the family by involving police. My father sent a text saying I was no longer welcome at family events and that I'd chosen property over blood. I responded by sending them the security footage of Sarah trying to break into my home with a crowbar, along with screenshots of all her forged documents. I added one message: I chose safety and legal ownership over letting someone steal from me. If that makes me unwelcome in the family, then this family isn't worth being part of. Uncle Thomas and Aunt Patricia have been incredible. They've completely cut off my parents and Sarah, and Thomas even testified on my behalf for the restraining order hearing. He told the judge about years of witnessing my parents' differential treatment and Sarah's escalating entitlement. Aunt Margaret wrote a letter to the court about how my grandmother specifically wanted to leave me money because she saw how I was treated and wanted to give me a chance at independence. But here's the plot twist. Sarah's arrest triggered an investigation that revealed she'd been committing other frauds. Remember how my parents were supporting her financially? Turns out, she'd also been collecting money from them under false pretenses. She claimed to be running an online marketing business and had them investing in it. There was no business. She'd created fake websites, fake client testimonials, and fake monthly reports showing growth. My parents had given her nearly $200,000 over 3 years. When they found out, the police informed them during the investigation, they finally saw who Sarah really was. My mother called me sobbing, genuinely sobbing this time. She kept saying, "We created a monster, and what did we do to you?" I didn't comfort her. I said, "You told me every day of my childhood that I wasn't supposed to exist. You let Sarah torment me because you felt guilty about having me. You created this situation, and now you're facing the consequences." My father sent a long email apologizing, admitting that they'd been so focused on making Sarah feel secure as the planned child that they'd completely neglected my emotional needs. He said they'd been in therapy since Sarah's arrest and were beginning to understand the damage they'd caused. He asked if we could start over. I haven't responded. I'm not ready. Maybe I'll never be ready. As for Sarah, her legal troubles are just beginning. She's facing multiple felony charges, and the prosecutor seems determined to make an example of her. Her lawyer reached out about a plea deal that would involve her formally renouncing any claim to my property and paying restitution for the legal fees I've incurred. I agreed, with the condition that the restraining order becomes permanent. But the best part of this update isn't about them. It's about me. These 3 months have been transformative. Without the constant weight of my family's dysfunction, I've thrived. Jennifer renewed her lease and recommended a friend, Kevin, who needed a place. He's a chef and pays partial rent by meal prepping for me twice a week. We've become friends, and for the first time, I'm building a chosen family. I've been in therapy, working through 24 years of being told I shouldn't exist. My therapist says I show signs of complex PTSD from the chronic emotional abuse. We're working through it, and I'm learning that my worth isn't determined by whether I was planned or not. The duplex has become more than just property. It's become a symbol of my independence and worth. I've fixed it up, planted a garden, and even adopted a dog named Chance. Yes, the name is symbolic. The neighborhood has welcomed me, and I'm building the community I never had growing up. Uncle Thomas visits regularly, and we're building the relationship I wish I'd had with my father. Aunt Patricia sends care packages and checks in weekly. Aunt Margaret, now 89, told me she's changing her will to leave me her vintage piano because someone who fights this hard for their place in the world deserves beautiful things. Last week, I got a letter from Sarah. I don't know how she managed to send it given the restraining order, but it wasn't threatening, just sad. She wrote about how she'd spent her whole life believing she was special because she was planned, and that belief became her entire identity. Without it, she doesn't know who she is. She said she hates me, not for having the duplex, but for proving that being planned meant nothing, that I'd succeeded despite being unwanted while she'd failed despite being given everything. I didn't respond, but I did something I never thought I'd do. I felt sorry for her. Not enough to forgive her, but enough to understand that we were both victims of our parents' toxic narrative. The difference is, I fought to overcome it while she let it consume her. I'm keeping the letter as a reminder. Not of her or my parents, but of how far I've come. 24 years of being told I was an accident, a disruption, a mistake, and here I am, a homeowner, a good neighbor, a loyal friend, and most importantly, someone who knows their worth isn't determined by the circumstances of their birth. To everyone who messaged with support, advice, and their own stories, thank you. You helped me realize I wasn't crazy, I wasn't overreacting, and I deserved to protect what I'd worked for. To anyone dealing with similar family dynamics, you are not defined by whether you were planned, wanted, or expected. You are defined by who you choose to become despite the narratives others create about you. And you deserve every good thing you work for, regardless of what anyone, family or otherwise, thinks you should or shouldn't have. I'm going to continue living my life, improving my property, and building relationships with people who value me for who I am, not for what order I arrived in. The duplex isn't just my house anymore. It's my home, my sanctuary, and proof that accidents can become miracles if you give them the chance to grow. Sarah's trial is in 3 months. I'll attend, not out of spite, but for closure. After that, I'm done looking backward. I have a future to build, and for the first time in my life, I'm excited about it. Thank you, Reddit. You helped save my home and, more importantly, my sense of self-worth. Final reflection. 6 months have passed since everything began with Sarah demanding my duplex. The trial concluded last month. She received 2 years probation, mandatory therapy, and has to pay $15,000 in restitution for my legal fees. She's also permanently barred from contacting me or coming near my property. My parents have continued therapy and recently sent another letter asking for reconciliation. They've acknowledged the deep harm they caused and want to make amends. I've agreed to one family therapy session with them, not for reconciliation, but for closure. I need to say things that have been burning in my chest for 24 years, and they need to hear them. The session is next week. I'm nervous but ready. My therapist will be there, and Uncle Thomas has offered to come for support. Whether it leads to any kind of relationship with them remains to be seen, but I'm no longer the scared child desperate for their approval. I'm a grown man who owns his home, his choices, and his worth. The duplex has been transformed. I've renovated both units, adding value and beauty to what was once just a desperate grab for stability. The garden is thriving, my tenants have become friends, and the neighborhood feels like the family I always wanted. Chance, my dog, greets me every evening like I'm the most important person in the world, because to him, I am. Sometimes I stand in my backyard, looking at what I've built, and think about that 7-year-old boy who was told he was the reason his mother couldn't succeed, the 10-year-old who believed he'd stolen his family's happiness by being born, the 18-year-old who left home convinced he didn't deserve to take up space in the world. I wish I could tell him, you're going to make it. You're going to build something beautiful. And one day, you're going to realize that being an accident was actually the best thing that ever happened to you, because it forced you to create your own worth instead of waiting for someone else to assign it to you. The duplex stands as proof that unplanned doesn't mean unwanted, that accidents can become achievements, and that sometimes the best revenge against those who say you shouldn't exist is simply to exist brilliantly, independently, and unapologetically. This is James, the accident who became an architect of his own life, signing off.